we tend to make ourselves smaller, be really serious, and effort, like paddle a lot. And so learning the skill of how to put the paddle down, how to jump and play, and how to increase our wild. Because I see so often we diminish our wild. We get to be adults and then we're like, okay, childhood is now over. That sense of play is now over.
I remember reading a quote by Golda Meir, the Iron Lady of Israel, and one of the first women in the world to serve as head of state. And she said this: "Trust yourself," she said. "Create the kind of self that you will be happy to live with your all your life. Make the most of yourself by fanning that tiny inner spark of possibility into flames of achievement." That got me. And what would happen if you did just that? If you trusted yourself, if you followed that inner guide, and we talk a lot about that with the Hug It Out method, right? We talk about that on Holistically Speaking and how to hug it out, going within. And when I first stumbled on HeatherAsh Amara, I could totally align with her words and how they kind of played into that, creating that kind of self. Well, HeatherAsh is here. She's an author of 9 books, including the best-selling Warrior Goddess Training, The 7 Secrets of Happy and Healthy Relationships with Don Miguel Jr., and now Wild, Willing, and Wise, a book that skillfully and unconditionally guides readers to recognize that emotional turmoil that we have, each of us have, that hardship, and how we can turn that imbalance into finding the inner freedom and the light that begins within, just from using our own energies. All I can say is it is such a pleasure to have you here. You're traveling the country. I'm so happy to be on one of those first stops of this new book journey. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Hilary. It's a delight to be here and get to share the new baby.
Yes, the new baby. I love that. And you have many babies. This is not your first rodeo. As we mentioned, there are a number of books you have, many bestsellers. But why is this one different?
This one is so different in that it was written during the pandemic, and I decided we needed lightness. I was actually, the book I was working on was this very heavy memoir, and it was really intense. And I just recognized this is not what I need or what the world needs right now. We need simple, fun, and also deep. And so that is what Wild, Willing, and Wise is. There's a lot of joy and laughter throughout it. I tell some really hilarious stories about my wonderful mistakes. And there's a guidance of here's how to do it. Do this first, do this. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. So there's a lot of spaciousness in it. And it also has some really, really deep wisdom embedded in it as well.
Well, I think the one thing about this book that I remember reading a lot of really beautiful testimonials and reviews about, that it's not just teaching people how to do things, it is giving them quizzes of self-reflection and simple exercises and visualizations and different antidotes. So it's a book that you find your own inner work by almost like doing a workbook of the wise and the wisdom and the willing, right?
Exactly, exactly. And I wanted it to be really interactive in that way. So it felt like getting to know yourself better in a really delightful way. So that's really what the quizzes and the interactions and meeting those 3 guides. And then I also did visualizations, audio visualizations that are online. That is another layer of hand holding and loving of like, here, let's go inside. Let's find these qualities inside of you instead of let me tell you about them. So it becomes really personal.
Oh, yeah. And even if we're on a journey, on our own journeys, we always need support, right? We need the guidance. We need people who kind of, they're on their own journeys, but when we come together, we're able to heal as a collective, as an odyssey in a way. So for you, how did you come into this work to where you found your own support and your own healing?
How far do I go back?
However far back you want to go. I mean, what brought you to this place,
Yeah, it's such a great question. Well, I grew up in Southeast Asia, and I always had this sense of being outside. and looking at things that I yearned for. And I think that really came to a head when I was 19 and I was in Nepal and I was by myself for about 3 weeks. And every morning I would wake up spontaneously at 4 or 5 a.m. and I'd walk down to the old town of Kathmandu. It doesn't even exist any longer, but the old temples. And I would just find myself sitting at those temples, watching people come and worship and sing and chant and feeling the devotion that was happening there and wanting to be part of it and not understanding or like not feeling like it was my culture or my place. And then watching the tourists show up. So like between 5 and 7 was pure local devotion. And then starting around 8, all the tourists would show up and then I would watch it shift. And so there was this like sense of like, how do I get to the heart of things? And at the time I was reading a book called Dreaming Down the Dark by Starhawk.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it just lit a fire in me because I was like, oh, I can learn how to do this. I can do ceremony. I can be devotional. And there's a thing that the permission to be creative in relationship with spirituality, that it doesn't have to be a firm religion that's passed down and that there's somebody intermediary between you and God. But what the revelation was like, oh, I can go direct. I don't need to wait for anybody. I don't need permission. And I started learning about the seasons and the cycles and the elements. And that was my step in. And that was like created a support system, knowing there were other people that believed and felt like I did, a deep reverence for the earth. And then starting to build community from there.
Amazing. But I'm going to have to ask you, like, what took you to that place at such a young age? Were you raised there?
I was raised in Singapore. I was born in Hong Kong and grew up in Singapore and Bangkok and Hong Kong. So moving and traveling a lot, moving every couple of years. And I had an experience when I was 7 that really changed the trajectory of my life, I would say, or was like in alignment with my trajectory. Who knows how that works, right? But
yeah.
I was in India with my family because we traveled every year. We would go someplace new around the world. I had a crazy, wonderful childhood.
What an incredible experience.
Yeah, it
up.
was. It really, really was. So we're in India. I'm 7 years old. I had earlier that year, I decided I was going to write a book. I was super clear. I'm going to write a book. I know, like what?
Okay.
And I picked up my pen and I got my favorite pad of paper and I started writing. And I got a page in and I realized I don't have enough experience to write a book. Okay, I'll go get some experience. And I went out and played. And I think I wrote my first book at 34. Like it took, I needed experience. But later that year, we were in India and I was holding my dad's hand and we were walking down this really dirty street, I remember. And I was worried about where my head was, is I was worried about my white shoes, that they were going to get dirty. And I looked up and there's another about 7 years old, about the same age as me, same height, young Indian girl walking towards me. And she was basically wearing rags, barefoot, really mussy hair. And our eyes met. And best way I can describe it is we just completely fell in love. And my heart opened and there was like this realization of there's no separation, that there's this incredible unity between humans and the world. Like I just felt connected to everything, the plants, the sky, her. And that was literally probably a 5 to 10 second interaction. And then we passed. And that I never, of course, saw her again, but it changed something fundamental inside of me. And started a quest for how do I find that? Where is that? And I looked in a lot of, not correct places, or it's not quite the right word, but in places that wasn't, I got really big into politics. I'm like, maybe this will bring connection. I'm like, not exactly. I love this, but no, this isn't it. And lots of trial and error. But I was still really young. I was I think 19 when I read Dreaming Down the Dark and started my own spiritual path and started connecting with others and realizing that was what the yearning was spiritual connection and community.
Oh, absolutely. I think it always comes back to community and that connection we have to have with self, with others, and then with nature. Like that trifecta is so important. And I feel like we're seeing more people doing that now. We're seeing more of that trifecta connection that we realize we can't do it alone. We need a collective, but we also are so connected to this world, and thankfully more people are taking an interest in how to protect it because it's the only one we got. But to realize that at such an early age and to have that awareness where the world really is your classroom must have been unbelievable. And even like what you just said about that moment with that woman, seconds, right? That it goes back to that quote, it's either a moment, a season, or a lifetime that people are in your life. But just that quick flash made such a adjustment in your whole trajectory of things.
Yeah, exactly.
Beautiful. So when we talk about Wild, Willing, and Wise, which, by the way, let's give the full name of the book, which is Wild, Willing, and Wise, an interactive guide for when to paddle, when to rest, and when to jump naked into the river of life. Which, I gotta be honest, that sounds pretty awesome.
It's so good.
It just sounds like if there was a word that went with it, it would be like, woohoo!
Exactly. It's so much fun. It's a journey. The book's really a journey.
And is it a book where you feel like this is the time when it needed to be written? Like, could this book have been released 10 years ago in your life, or are you at a different point in your life?
I think both. I'm in a different place in my life, and I think the world is in such a different place as well. Yeah.
Do you think much of this book is something that without the pandemic, you still wouldn't be here?
I don't know if I would have gotten to the place that I got to with this book, because there was a level of permission that I gave myself to cuss and be funny and share stories that I've never shared before, and kind of poke fun at myself in a delightful way of places where I made mistakes or places where I had insights that were in there's a place where, just for example, the whole book's about water. So I start with a story about the Grand Canyon and being on the Grand Canyon for 2 weeks and getting flipped. And that's the entry into the book. And then, later I share a story about going kayaking on way, way, way too rough water and being a beginner and like losing the kayak within 10 minutes. So there's just this kind of loving humor throughout all of it, and this encouragement for all of us to take ourselves a little bit less seriously and find our way to be on that river of life where we're not paddling all the time, where we're not struggling all the time, where we actually learn how to work with the flow rather than against it.
Flow, right? Just flow. Yeah, instead of always doing, just being, like go with the current. I love that. Using water as the element that's your choice. Are you a water sign yourself?
I am not. I am such a fire person. Like all my other books are fire. I'm a Firewalk instructor. I've been in deep relationship with fire for decades. And so that was another thing that was a big departure, is for me to be like, oh, right, let's play with water. And I do think like that's the balance. Like we necessarily don't need more water, not more fire right now. I think we're in a time where we could use more water and more soothing and more, let's learn to read the river of life and learn skills. So the book is very much a skill. Yeah, it's a skill building book. Like there's ways to learn how to navigate with less effort, even during challenging times.
There's a lot of books out there like that now, but every single one of them is different. And I interview a lot of people and talk to a lot of people about that. And what I love is that we all have our own journeys, right? We bring in our own stories, we bring in our own learnings and lessons. And from that, we see these beautiful books that are almost like so many guides that we can learn from, right? And having your journey as one of them. But I've never heard it expressed this way, which I love, because that's what makes you different, right? Coming from that place where it's traveling along the river, right? Really seeing the flow of life and going with it. And we're going to hit some currents every once in a while, but we're able to steer ourselves. We're able to just go with it without any guidance really, except our inner guidance. But what I thought is really amazing when you're talking about water as the element, that your book is fiery red.
I know, because all
So
my other
like
books were fiery red. Yeah. They're like, we got
okay.
a theme going. We got to keep with it for the
Well,
cover.
same
Yeah.
with your traveling, right? Like the whole
Yeah.
travels that you're on. You're in like a fun airstream, right? Okay, I'm
Yep.
so
And I'm
jealous
with
of this whole
my,
journey.
I know it's so good. I'm going to share it as much as I can so everybody can come with me.
Well,
Yeah. And
and
I've
I
got a
love that.
red truck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have this like the red wagon taking you on the road. You have this little map on your website. And by the way, folks, we're going to share everything on in the podcast notes, including the link to the book, which is Wild, Willing, and Wise, an interactive guide for when to paddle, when to rest, and when to jump naked into the river of life. Which part of that do you enjoy the most?
Oh my God. Definitely the jumping naked into the river of life.
That's what I
Makes me
thought.
giggle every time.
And you know what? The fact that you bring up the humor, I really want to stress that too, because when I talk about my own method, which is the Hug It Out method, which is based on your own healing, is always have the humor, which is the H, understanding and gratitude, right? The hug. I feel like we don't do that enough, where we laugh at those parts of ourselves and in our life that maybe have been really hard when we were, swimming upstream or paddling upstream, and then looking back on it and saying, okay, that was a little ridiculous, right? And the more of those moments when we see the ahas and the humor, I think allow us to let go more. Don't you?
I really agree. I really
Yeah.
agree. And so often, I mostly work with women. This book is geared
Mm-hmm.
for all genders. What I found from working with women is that there's a way that we tend to make ourselves smaller, be really serious, and effort, like
Mm-hmm.
paddle a lot. And so learning the skill of how to put the paddle down, how to jump and play, and how to increase our wild. Because I see so often we diminish our wild. We get to be adults and then we're like, okay, childhood is now over. That sense of play is now over.
We need to invite ourselves into more play. It's so important that we take that moment. We lose the inner child so easily. We're like, adulting, got to grow up, can't do those things. And I mean, we're all there. I think all of us are our own teachers in that way. Like, let go a little bit, be okay with that moment. So the thing that I would love to talk to you about is within this book, and I was reading a lot of like I said, the testimonials people were sharing, but you said something really beautifully, and it was that our lives are a constant cycle through three energies: the creativity and abundance of the wild, the courage and power of willing, and the gratitude and surrender of wise. And I would love for you to touch on that.
Yes. I started writing the book looking at these three archetypes of the maiden, mother, and crone, and just being curious.
Mm,
And and then decided I wanted to make it not age-based and not gender-based. And so that's where wild, willing, and wise came from.
mm,
And the wild is our play, creativity, like willingness to make mistakes and try again and laugh at ourselves. It's an incredibly important energy. And the willing energy as an archetype is about the steadiness, that there's
mm,
times in our lives when we're birthing and growing something, and like you're up at 3 a.m. in the morning with the barfing kid, like, and you're willing, you show up. And it's the same thing with our work, our creative projects, that there's a level of willingness to grow something to maturity, that we get steady. Even if we don't know how we're going to do it, we show up. So more willing needed. And
mm,
sometimes less willing needed. I'll talk about that in a second. And then the third archetype, the third energy, is wise. And each of us has this deep connection to our own stillness, the what I call silent knowledge, that there is a intuitive connection that we can come back home to, that we can capture our own wise. So those are those three energies: wild, willing, and wise. And as I was writing about them, I noticed that we can get in deficiency of either any of these energies, or we can have an excess of them. And that's part of what the book helps us walk through is, are you balanced with this energy, or are you deficient, or are you in excess? And then there's a lot of tools about, if you're deficient, here's what to do. If you're in excess, here's what to do. in a really non-judgmental way. It's like it's just an adjustment. So
Mm.
I love the the coming together of these three qualities creates wholeness.
Mm. Another W.
Another W. And
I
wonder.
was
We can
just
go all the
and
W's,
wonder.
right?
Well, I'm like an alliteration geek. I love
Me too.
wordplay and alliteration. So I'm like wild, willing, wise, wonder, wholeness. You know,
It's the best.
that could be the next book.
Exactly.
Yeah. So with this tour just starting, because this book was just released in July of 2024, where do you see it going? Like, what's your hope for it?
Mm. My hope is that it will be a way for people to connect to themselves, but also in community, because I think it's such a perfect book for book clubs, for
Mm.
people to get together, to go through the exercises together, to ask questions, to run experiment. Like, okay, let's take a week and play with being wild and report back next week. Let's take this next month and deepen into what is willing. It creates a way for us to have a container to communicate and to go deeper with each other. So I hope it goes out and helps, we'll use another, weaves people together, both to themselves as well as to their neighbors or even strangers.
I love that idea of book club. I mean, a lot of times and I've been in book clubs before. Have you ever been in a book club?
Actually
Yeah.
haven't, but
No,
I love
but I feel the idea of a book club, because I've been in a lot of book clubs and I've been in a lot of women's circles, right? And this is
yes,
bringing two together to where maybe the
exactly.
book's not going to be a fiction book or a girly book, but it can be a book or coming back to the sisterhood, like the red tent, you know, really the like the moon parties and things that we've gotten away from as women. Having something to look forward to and share and collect on and review together as a sisterhood, I think is really beautiful idea. We need more of that. I love that. All right, everybody out there who's tuning into this, we want to hear about the first Wild Women and Wise book club. I'm
Absolutely.
I'm with you on that one. Gosh, that would be a great idea. Awesome. So I would love to play a little game with you. I usually do this towards the end of our conversations. And what I do is I collect words that you've said and I just say them out loud. And I want you to come back with the first word that comes to mind, like a word
I love this.
association game. I know, so much fun, right? So I'll say a word. Just don't even think about it. Come back and tell me what you think. Okay? You ready?
Ready.
Okay, perfect. Here we go. River,
Freedom.
knowledge,
Peace.
intuition,
Groundedness.
stillness,
Happy.
energy,
Flow.
inner child. We're going to hyphenate
Delight.
it. Wild,
Willing.
willing,
Whole.
wise,
Stillness.
trust.
Ah,
Is that the word?
that's the word.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Okay. That is a word.
It's a
How
word.
many How many H's
How
are on
many
the end of
H's was
that?
in that word? Probably 8. I tend to
It's like
do lots of, yeah.
That's great. Love it. Really beautiful. Can you tell me, like, I want to know how you came to the name HeatherAsh. Is that your given name?
My given name is Heather,
Mm-hmm.
and I was blessed to do a fire walk when I was a young woman. I was 24, and it completely shifted my life. And the next year, I got an invitation to become a firewalk instructor. So at 25 years old, I started leading people across hot coals. And my community, my nickname became Ash. And so at
Yeah.
some point, I don't know, 20 plus years ago, I decided to bring them together because that felt more an embodiment of who I am as
Yeah.
HeatherAsh. Yeah, so that's where that came from.
And what do you prefer to be called then? Ash or HeatherAsh?
my closest friends call me Ash. So I
I
always
got
am
that.
delighted. Yeah, when people call me Ash, I'm like, ooh, we're friends.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and I love HeatherAsh too. It's so pretty. Like it
It
feels,
is pretty. And then,
yeah,
of course, the fire is what I thought. That when you started talking about the fire, I'm like, oh, I wonder if that's where it comes from, because I didn't
it
really
is.
dig that deep to know. And Amara?
Amara came so funny. When I got married, I decided I wanted to create my own last name.
Yeah.
My husband at the time's name was Smith, and I'm like, I am not becoming a Heather Smith. Like that is not happening. And my last name was Mackenzie Gaudet. I had a long hyphenated last
Mhm.
name, and I was like, I just want to create a new identity as I step into this
Yeah.
relationship. And so my goddaughter, I'm such a weirdo. My goddaughter in Peru, her name is Amara, and I
Uh-huh.
loved the name, and so just decided to make that my last name.
So I love names and learning the origin of names. And Amara, I looked it up,
Isn't it
means
beautiful? Yes.
everlasting grace, immortal, to love. So there's everlasting. That's so beautiful. Yeah. I was curious if that was actually a given name with your family, or if you actually changed it to that. Because look, a lot of times we don't have a choice, right? We're given a name at birth. That's who we
Yes.
are. We might be able to find the roots of a name, but to be able to give yourself a name, which a lot of people do later in life, but to choose something like that, that's everlasting. There's another word association word for you. What does everlasting mean for you?
Oh God, that one's a good one. Everlasting joy is what comes up.
Oh, that's a good word. Yeah, I like that. Good deal. So if you were to leave listeners and those who are tuning in watching with one piece of HeatherAsh Amara advice, what would it be? Wisdom. We'll say wisdom for the wild, willing, and wise. What would it be?
To be patient with self, that the journey of transformation is it's a journey, and that when we let go of what it should look like and start to lean into it's going to take as long as it takes, then there's a release and an opening that starts to happen that allows us to listen more deeply to what's actually needed.
Yeah. Letting go of those expectations that we think something has to go this way when it's actually going exactly the way it's supposed to be going. I felt that. I needed that reminder, so thank you. I appreciate
so
that.
Welcome.
Thank you. So just to reiterate, the book is Wild, Willing, and Wise, an interactive guide for when to paddle, when to rest, when to jump naked into the river of life. We're going to put that in the podcast notes of this episode with HeatherAsh. And it was such a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Hilary, and thanks for all the magic that you put into the world through your podcast and your teachings and your light. Gratitude.
So much gratitude. Thank you. You can follow HeatherAsh's journey on the book tour just by checking out her website. Also, you can grab a copy of her latest book, Wild, Willing, and Wise, an interactive guide for when to paddle, when to rest, and when to jump naked into that river of life. That is all going to be available to you on the Holistically Speaking podcast page, so definitely check it out. And if you've enjoyed this conversation, drop a thoughtful response wherever you're tuning in. And don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button so that others can find this episode as well as the podcast too, and be able to find this conversation and see if it's useful to them. Holistically Speaking is edited by Two Market Media with music by Lipbone Redding and, of course, supported by you. So thank you so much. And never forget that everything you need begins right here within. You have the wild, you have the wisdom, and you have everything you need to let go and just trust yourself. I know you've got it in you. I believe in you. I love you. And I'm sending you hugs every day. Be well.
I know